And get started. This is a workshop, and this is what we've had scheduled for a while. It's been on the agenda on the calendar to do our final piece of the budget workshop for administration. And then today, when we found out we were going to be able to get our audit done, I thought, well, instead of having a full agenda, that we could do the discussion part of the audit during this workshop, and then we will do a formal approval of it during our actual meeting, just to kind of, save some time and use our time efficiently. So, I will call this workshop to order, if everybody is so okay with that. And do we want to let Gary go ahead and go first?
If y'all are good with that, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Nobody signed up, so I'm going to move this out of the way.
Yeah.
What you have here is a comprehensive report, which means
Big thing
that
here.
it encompasses the whole year, and it's called the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, sometimes referred to as ACFR. My goal tonight is to briefly go over some of the parts. It is very comprehensive, as it says, but it does give you the picture of the whole year for the city of Bryant, Arkansas, for the year ended December 31, 2022. If you'll turn to the page 2, this report is composed of about 4 areas: the introductory section, the financial section, the statistical section, and the compliance section. I'll go over some major parts of each of those sections. The page 5, that's the letter of transmittal. That's what Joey just introduces the report. If you turn to page 13.
Oh, Gary, let me just interject. If you notice, this is without a date, official date, and it does have draft on the report. We signed the engagement letter today, and all those will change to tomorrow's date, and there should be if there's any substantial changes besides date, I'll let you guys know, but that's the last bit of it.
Our industry has gotten real strict, and you have to have everything approved and signed before you can have an official release. So, my name is Gary Welch, by the way, CPA and CVA with ATA CPAs. That's a 15-firm group, mostly out of Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama. And we consist of about 250 CPAs in those 15 groups. We're from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and we merged with this group, a regional CPA firm. On page 13, second paragraph, this is the most important paragraph. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the government activities, business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city of Bryant, Arkansas as of December 31, 2022, and the respective changes in financial position, and where applicable, cash flows thereof for the year ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That is the governmental accounting procedures, and that's the last paragraph I'll read, by the way. Now, the next big section is called the Manager's Discussion and Analysis. We call it the MD&A, and you need to read this because it will give you a very concise and overview of the city. If you turn to page 19, the last 2 columns, the first subtotal, you see the total assets of the city of Bryant increased from 105 to 117 million. And the liabilities, that's a $12 million increase. The liabilities only increased $2 million. And if you look at the very bottom last 2 columns, your net worth or net position of the city which is all the assets less the liabilities, went from 43 million to 55 million. Now, that's a pretty good year in itself. And on the next page, this is your revenues and expense. And you see that you increased your revenues in the last two columns, 39 million to 44 million. And then your expenses, that's a $5 million increase. Your expenses increased 3 million from 29 to 32 million. And so at the very bottom line, that's how your net position got from 43 million to 55 million. But that's 2 pages out of 10 pages of the MD&A, which is a very good read. Now, and y'all can stop me with any questions, and I know this will be brief, so if you have real questions later, she can give you my email. Page 28, these are, page 28 and 29 are the 2 most important financial pages in this report. And it'll give you 3 columns. One is the government activities. That is the user fee. That is the tax areas, so to speak. That's your primary government. The next column is your business type, which is your water, wastewater, and stormwater. And this page gives you those 2 activities. Again, at the bottom, you see the government activities had 28 million, the business type 26, and that total is your 55 million net position, or what I call net worth of the city of Bryan. And if you look up at the top, the 4th number from the top, most of your asset value, which is normal, is in capital assets. That's 45 million in governmental and 35 million in business type. Now I want you to look at about 2/3 of the page down in the right above total liabilities. I want to make a point here. You see net pension liabilities. That is something that was regulated to put on the books about 7 or 8 years ago. And I want to highlight this because the city of Bryan is in a much better position than about 80% of the other cities. I've seen cities with $60 and $70 million worth of pension liability, which means they've underfunded for a number of years. But in your case, you've got 11 million for governmental and 1 million for business type, and your total net pension liability is $12 million. That's a low number in comparison to other cities. And a little later we'll look at some of the notes. In the pension notes, you're paying, for example, 23.5% of lot fee salaries. That's police and fire. There's cities that pay closer to 40% of lot fee salaries, and that gets real expensive. Now, the next most important page is your revenue and expense, and I won't lie to you, these reports are hard to read. On this report, for example, there's total revenue displayed on this page of $44 million. And there's total expenses displayed of $32 million. And the net revenue over expense is $12 million. And if you look at the last column, the 3rd number from the top to the bottom is $12,134,790. The revenue is scattered over the page, the expenses are scattered over the page, but that's the net result. And again, that's how your 43 million got up to 55 million. Now, the next page, 28, we start going through some detailed governmental activities. And if you look on 30, you see the governmental activities are general fund, street fund, designated tax fund, bond fund, and then what they call other non-major funds, and that's about 11 individual funds. Page 31, this is, I'm just going to briefly go over this, but this is why some of this stuff is confusing, because you have a big difference between how governments keep books and how the Governmental Accounting Standards Board wants you to present your results. And you see up there, you start with fund balance 27 million, you add the capital assets that aren't normally recorded as capital assets, or recorded as capital outlay. And then you have the liabilities, and then you have the pension liability. So in this case, you go from 27 million to 28 million. That's, I'm just illustrating how odd that is. Page 34, you see that how that, 31 to 33, that's your governmental funds. Page 34, and the next two pages is your business type, or utility revenue, utility operating, and stormwater. And those go into that detail. Now, the biggest portion of this financial statement starts on page 40, and it runs all the way to 72. That's 30 plus pages, and now all it is disclosures and more highlights of the numbers we've just been discussing. If you want to see some details, go to page 47, for example. This is your capital and leased assets, and I'm sure Joy has told you how difficult leasing concepts are in cities and every other business. They changed all the rules in 2022. And if you're not familiar with that, they made you record operating leases as assets and liabilities to be consistent with capital leases or equipment purchases. And they did, accounting is very high in consistency and comparability. So they wanted the leased assets to show up as assets and liabilities the same as purchased assets. That's as simple as I can explain it. Well, most accountants don't like it, but it is what it is. Now, another example, page 61. You got 7 pages dealing only with pension. You've got 3 basic pensions. You've got the district judge retirement, you've got the LOPI, which is the local police and fire, and then you've got the APERS, which is the Arkansas Public Employee Retirement System. And every one of those systems has what they call actuary reports that dictate how much liability you have to put on the books, and that's where you get that $12 million liability. It's not measured locally, so to speak. It was measured by actuaries. The next section is required supplemental information. That is on page 73 to 81. And this goes through some budget activity. I'll go over one of those on page 74. This is your general fund budget. And it's 4 columns: the original budget, final budget, and in comparison to actual. Now, here again, it shows a good result. You budgeted $10.9 million for revenues and achieved $11.9 million. You budgeted $20.8 million, well, that includes transfers, $20.8 million expenses, and you achieved you only spent $18 million, so that's a 2.4 benefit, and together you had a $4,200,000, last column, $4,200,000 positive result compared to budget. Going to page 82, this is where you get a lot of details on these non-major funds. If you look at 83 and 84, you see those 11 funds that make up these other governmental funds, and then they move over to the other column in the basic financial statements. The next sections, which is 10 pages, 19 pages, statistical section. And this is very informative. It'll tell you everything from revenue to, for example, on page 97, you see the sales tax history, and most of these schedules are 10 years. So you can see the trend in sales tax. Another informative display is on 101. This is your legal debt margin, and it's all based on state law and the assessed property value within your responsibility. For example, you have $88 million worth of debt limit on general obligation debt. You have no general obligation debt. You have $22 million debt limit on short-term liabilities, and you have 3.8 on short-term on debt on that category. So you're well within your debt limits. The last section I want to discuss is on page 110. This is the compliance section. What this deals with is the governmental funds that you receive that we are required to audit in the internal control and compliance. If you turn to page 113, that is your governmental funds of $4,196,000. It comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and all of these funds are generally funneled through Arkansas, come from federal to Arkansas to you. And that's your funds. We have two letters here. We have the general audit letter, and then we have to identify the major funds and audit those separately. We did note on page 119 that there needs to be some improvement in transfer of assets under leased vehicles and reconciling capital assets under new software. Both of these instances are mentioned, and your finance department has answered these with corrective actions. And then on page 122, we have the collection form, which is the federal government form. It needs to be done on a timely basis, but of course this was an oddball year with timing, which deals with some changes in local government and the lease activities, which caused a lot of delays. That is my 10-minute review of a 2-hour report. If there's no questions, again, I will be glad to respond to any emails or later questions.
While Gary's still here, I did want to point out just a couple of things. One of the biggies for 2022 that increased our stuff was the building of the parkway. Which is obviously still happening, but we did a big chunk of it in 2022. And so just note that a lot of the differences from 21 to 22 are the parkway. And then also, you guys always ask me about, ending the year. Page 74, 75, and 76 are the comparisons for the general fund budget in the column on the far right. So you know how I'm always telling you we're pretty close on our budgets? Like if you'll notice, the major differences are in personnel, like we've talked about, and then capital, because if we didn't finish a capital project and it got re-encumbered the following year, but most of our other categories are pretty tight. And then I did also the ARPA in 2022, so that's mentioned several places and was a big item in 2022. And then another change from last year's report to this year's report that I told you guys about, I had been previously putting most of the debt funds only in that topmost level at the government-wide, lumping them in there, and this year they suggested that I break those out and put them back in the non-major column. And I really think it's gonna improve the transparency of the overall report, because it will make it easier for anybody looking at it to match my monthly reports to you guys to this report. So that was a pretty big difference, and then also that in 2022, for the first time, our sales tax was so good, which was another big difference in 2022, that it kicked that 2016 bond fund over into the category of a major fund. It previously was not deemed a major fund. And so that was another big change. So those were just some big high-level, Bryant-specific changes that I wanted to draw your attention to. So any questions for me or Gary, or anything on the audit?
Thank you for all your hard work. I know this was weighing on you, Joy.
This was a hard one.
This is probably one of the hardest reports to assemble, and I will personally say that this was a very unusual year with the lease changes and the mayoral changes that delayed. We actually were looking at coming in here late August, September.
I kept thinking it was going to happen.
But I would say it'll never happen again in the same manner.
Yes.
She has worked feverishly on it. Conan, she's almost been in tears a couple or three times.
Yes, it has been very frustrating. But I think the overall report, I really think is good, and it's probably better, for the work that we've done over the last couple of months, although that's hard to say, but I think you guys will like it, and as you read it, let me know any questions you have, because I do know it's a big report to kind of slog through, but it does have a lot of really great information in it.
We will not be able to vote on this until we're actually meeting. This was just for discussion purposes, so that we saved a little bit of time off of our meeting time, but I wanted y'all to be able to see the report. I'm proud of where we are as a city, because we've kept ourselves, well-funded and out of debt.
We're in a good position.
We're in a good position, even when you have a tough year like we've had in 2023. And that's why you do those things. That's why you keep a lot of cash in your back pocket, because there's going to be times you have to have that savings that's recommended. And we do a good job of saving, and when it comes time that something happens and we need to spend it, we're not where some other municipalities are.
And I had a discussion with Joy about bond money and investing, and those banks that went under, they were buying millions and millions of dollars worth of bonds at 0.05%. The market went to 5%, and guess where the value of those 0.05 bonds went?
Yeah.
And if you can't hold them to maturity, you got a big problem.
Yeah.
Selling $1 million bond for $600,000.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And I've seen cities that had that problem and had negative investment return of millions of dollars for the last 2 years. It's because that's where you need to really be cautious on what you do with the bond money at the front end of those issue dates.
Well, and that's why it's so critical, if we had invested that 2016 and it took as long to do it as we did, we would have been in a real bad situation. So it's kind of a catch-22, because like with your personal finances, it's a gamble anytime you put something in, the market. And so, and it's hard to do cash flows for city stuff, because you're not in control of a lot of the factors that really play into a lot of those big construction projects, like weather and all that stuff, so, I did also, request that they go ahead and do an early arbitrage calculation on closing that previous 2016 bond fund for the Bryant Parkway. And so they told me they're going to start it December 1st. And then they should be able to get that report to us, and that will let us know if we do owe anything because of taking so long on that, and plenty of time to be able to take it out of what we have saved, you know, so,
Well, I'm familiar with arbitrage.
yes.
You don't know what arbitrage is?
Go ahead and
When
explain.
you issue a city bond, it is tax exempt. Let's say you issue a bond for 2% interest and you invested at 4%, you violated the arbitrage rules under the IRS, because you're not allowed to take tax exempt bond money and make money.
on it.
And if you do, you have to pay it back.
Yes, you could owe a tax.
With fines and
Yeah.
other stuff and case. So the problem that happened with the 2016, the first one, as you all know, was getting the FAA approval and all the stuff that took so much longer. We had a 3-year cap to spend that money, and we didn't meet our cap. So, you know, that also stretched out that investment time. So I just want to make, sure that before we get any further in that we've got that calculation and we know, you know.
Well, most of the time, if you're not holding money a long period of time and you're investing in money market, for example, you're paying out 2 to 3% and earning a point. So you just don't have an arbitrage problem.
Yeah.
You have to earn more than you're paying out to have an arbitrage exposure.
Yeah, this year, 2022 would have been the first year I would have been worried that we would have actually had an issue with arbitrage, because for years it hasn't been an issue, but, you know, it really could have affected us in 2022 and 2023, so.
And it's probably the most ignored issue out there.
Yeah, I
Most
think
people don't say,
replace
They
it.
don't think
I can
about
owe tax,
Yeah.
that's a city bond, I can't owe that. But it can happen if you earn more than you pay out.
Okay. So y'all all okay with this? If you are, we will move on to our next budget review, the last of the budget reviews. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate y'all working to get this done today so Joy can smile tonight. She will be able to lay her head on her pillow
She's
peacefully.
happier than normal.
Yes, she is. So, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, Joy,
All right.
it's your show now.
Yes, so we were able to squeeze this in because this is an overarching for the admin categories. It's finance, HR, the attorney, the mayor, engineering, city clerk, IT, and community development categories. There were very, very little changes. If there were any changes, it was to reduce in an attempt to balance the budget. So the only one that had substantial changes was the engineering. We can go over those in a little while, but I'm going to go first, and I'll do finance and HR. There's, like I said, very little change in either one of those categories. But what we pay for JSAP is potentially going up, and we put some more in there to cover that. You know, and we put out feelers to see, and we've done this before in the past, to see if there's anybody else that can provide that service for us, and at a comparable rate. So we'll keep you guys posted on that. You know, as you know, anytime pretty much in my area, the paper savings from reducing the number of checks on the conversion, I'm hoping to put that towards travel and training this next year. I think it's really paid off in my department, the increase in travel and training in the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm hoping we get to keep that in there. And really, that's about it in my department. We don't have a lot specific to finance. So does anybody have any questions for me on those 2 sections? And I'll take questions for Charlotte and take them back to her if anybody has any questions on her budget. Hers is sort of like mine. It's paper, you know, personnel costs. There's 4 of us in finance and 3 of them in HR. Oh, I did also want to point out in the overall document that, you know how we pour over that chart on the listing of the people, you know? I don't know, somehow we missed it, but we had the mayor's office listed at 4, and it really should only be 3. And the only thing that we could think when we went back to look at it is that when we took the maintenance position and turned it into the facility manager position, that we didn't get rid of one, and we didn't change it, we just added one instead of getting rid of one. So that is a correction in this current document before you that we'll make in the next draft, but it doesn't affect any of the numbers. Nothing's changed. It's just on that high-level document that ties to the org charts. So yeah,
Joy, is there 3 in HR or 2 in HR?
there's 3. Well, one has left and it's on the agenda tonight.
Right, that's what I was asking.
But there are 3 budgeted for 2024. So, good question. Any other questions? If not, y'all have any? I'm going to turn it over to Ashley for legal. I don't want to rush you. We've got plenty of time.
Okay, Ashley. I don't have much change from mine from last year. I was able to get rid of LexisNexis, which is a research tool. It was $500 a month, but I was not using it, so got rid of that. In the future, if I ever need it, we can always repurchase it, but weren't needing it for now. So that was $496 a month. Other than that, all mine has stayed the same. Just you. And just so that we're clear, I just want to be clear, Joy, as we're coming through this book. For instance, her budget is not actually listed in here.
No, it rolls.
All of that is all in that administrative budget, right? I just wanted to make that clear to y'all so that as you're looking at it, you're not going, what are they talking about? You know, well, actually, all of these small groups fall into that administration budget and are made up. So, is that, I just want to make sure. And that is listed on page 48, if I'm correct.
That sounds about right.
We have to request new pictures because Truth's beard doesn't come, like, it doesn't even come.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not sure if the picture long enough to
And legal.
How long do you want it to go? So,
At this point, I don't even know.
Can you cut it off and, donate that for somebody?
I talked about it, but it'd be some different type of hair for somebody. I guess if somebody wanted a beard, I got them covered.
Yes.
anyway, I think y'all are able to see on page 48 that, we're actually coming in a little less on the administration budget than what we requested last year, right? And that was from request. Then is Gordon,
Well,
his is in there also, right?
Yeah, actually Gordon's and Truitt's are separate.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Truitt's is on page 50 and.
No, Gordon is in
Yeah,
ours.
Gordon is in ours.
Yeah.
Sorry. Gordon is in ours. Engineering is in ours, yeah.
So for IT, there's been some budget cuts. We cut my project line almost completely out, which there will be some, in my director's report, I'll discuss a little bit of that. I will have to come ask for some money next year. But there's so many things in IT that we just can't cut. I mean, we can't cut our email service. We can't cut our antivirus and malware detection and response software. So we cut what we could in IT. Otherwise, it pretty much stays the same, with the exception of there are some of the subscription services that do increase annually a little bit, as everything does. Any questions?
You can see on his page where they talk about different things that they're doing. is hoping for his goals there, upgrades and some things like that. But we'll have to bring those back. We'll have to bring some of that back. Okay. Did you want to try to go over the engineering one, Joy?
I can, and then I can get
Or
feedback from
Tim.
Tim. Tim's here.
Tim, okay, Tim, you want to do it? I'm
I will say that, I left, 20,000 in general fund. Most of it is related to the enterprise vehicles that are under lease, like Gary was talking about for the audit. And when we come to the end of that, we decide what we're doing, we'll probably either do away with those vehicles if we, and then that might free up some money that I'm hoping to actually put back towards a couple of things that we didn't get put in here. I believe we're gonna have some workers' comp savings, but I also think we didn't budget quite enough for our larger water meters for our own $15 monthly increase on our own meters, because some of ours, especially parks, are bigger than the average, and we calculated it on the small meter side. So, there's just, and this happens every year, usually, like as we finish out the year, if I get a good feel for it and I can bring those adjustments to you guys and keep it balanced, I'll bring them to you in January. But, it's relatively small items, so probably it would just be making it more precise. I don't think it will kick any categories over. But yeah, so in this document, engineering, if you'll notice, it's mentioned still on the engineering page, which is
47.
Page 47, and then there's a reference to the fact that it's actually been moved to the back. And what we did was we left the engineer's salary, but it's back on page 64. So if you see the three guys that worked underneath the engineer have been moved underneath Tim on page 64, and their salaries were moved back there to Public Works. But the engineer itself, we left under general fund in the salaries, wage, and benefits calculation, and that was one of those big major changes to the document that actually created some savings for the general fund and helped us to balance, if y'all remember. And that salaries, wages, and benefits calculation is on page 78, and I've highlighted in yellow the zeros underneath the engineer column, because for time allocation, I don't know what the new person's going to say that they allocate their time, so that's been pulled out. But the overall numbers for what's allocated includes the budgeted amount for the city engineer. So, did anybody have any, because that's the major change tonight under admin, and pretty much the only major change. So did anybody have any questions on that? I tried to spell it out as clearly as I could in the document, because I do, I want you guys to understand, and then also the graders to understand what's going on there. So it's mentioned also in the letter at the beginning of the document. I say, because creating that engineering department was one of the things that we had said was one of our major focus areas under smart growth. And so, making changes to that, like I said, my intro letter is on pages 9 and 10, and it just gives you, it's kind of like the MD&A and the audit report. It just gives you an overall big picture view of what the document's trying to say. So, yeah, so that's pretty much, Truett.
Yes, Truett, yes, Truett is. This is a separate page with its own budget. Right.
And my own picture.
And his own picture. There you go.
I've got no major changes. If anybody has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Expenses a little down from last year, and then getting better and better at the revenue side. When I first took over the department, I went from 2 revenue lines to I think close to 20 with the permitting part of it. So I feel like every year I get a little bit better at those numbers and what they look like.
I visited with Mark earlier today, and he didn't have anything for his 30 closed section. If anything, I can't remember if we reduced it a little bit, but I mean, overall, it's not very much the budget. Unicode is paid out of his, any training he does, and then a little bit of office supplies and Laserfish. So there's not much in there.
Any questions on that part? That's the last leg of the journey.
What accounted for the huge increase in your budget on the revenues? R20, your license, permits and fees?
Is that
It's a pretty
under,
significant increase.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, on page 50, this is Truett.
Trip.
On his estimated, you look at last year's actuals.
I think the biggest change there, on 10, the one above that is alcohol sales. That has just continued to get better and better, more and more in the community. And I think with some of the changes that probably get talked about a little bit later tonight, I think that could just increase. So partially there. And then, honestly, I think a lot of that is just, I know at least some of it, me doing a better job of forecasting it. With our new system and that process, sorry, I'm trying not to say negative words about going through it. But one of the silver linings to that was we went through each one of those fees and the code that it goes into, and we actually eliminated some GL lines because of that. I think it's given a better idea of being able to forecast those lines, directly realizing, you know, what permits are going into those GL lines.
Yeah, the conversion was painful, but I mean, it does have, obviously, we wouldn't have done it for no reason, so it has some payoff. It's just, it's been a long, slow, painful process. And that contributed to some of those comments in the audit report from 2022 as well, obviously, those capital assets. A lot of that was trying to clean up and make changes to our capital assets before we went into Tyler. So Crystal took the brunt of that and really worked hard on it. And it was not easy to do that at the same time that we implemented that leasing GASB. It was really horrendous.
So we completely finished with Tyler conversion?
I would not say completely, but we are very close. We still have a few hanging things that are, you know, bothering us, but we're very close.
I think Truett's shop has had the worst time out of late.
Yeah, and we're, once again, real close.
Yeah, real
For the most part, it's up and running. It's just some of the everyday, well, we worked earlier today on an issue that we had found. And at this point, we're learning more and more how to change those issues ourselves, which is a huge difference from where we started. But some of that just comes with the learning curve, but we're getting it.
Other questions on it? So, depending on how things play out during our meeting, this is your budget book. I think it will be on the agenda next meeting in December for actual approval of the budget. We have to get you a budget book by December 1st with a balanced budget. So.
And I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. We did put back in the senior center, the historical society, Boys and Girls Club, and the Chambers contracts,
Yes,
right?
this summary that you should have has all of those. They don't have a number there. That's because we put them back in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
The list that's there that says budget changes to balance, if there's something there, that's what we've taken out to reduce. And those items have zeros in them.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Unless you change that during the meeting. So that's kind of where we're at, but those are zero at this point in time, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joy, this may be a question for actual meeting, but our sales tax revenues, where are we at in projected with regards to projections year to date? I know there for the longest time we were behind on the projection.
Turn to page 26 and 27.
In the budget book?
I know you guys, I don't know, I didn't print all out a copy of your October ending report for tonight, but on it, you know, I've got them through October, but I've got the number through November as of a couple of days ago. And we came in a little bit below this time last year. But overall, our projection for 2024 is somewhere between 2 and 3%, closer to the 2%, which I'm really more comfortable with because I think that's more easy to obtain. So on that page, on page 27, that number that says 1493668, we actually got in 160403154. So quite a big difference, which will close that gap. Now, it was, less than what we got this time last year, but we're still coming in at the end of the year okay.
So just so you know, I think you all know on 27 where she has those highlighted numbers that are just filled in there. As she fills them in, they get real. They become real numbers. And that's why she's saying the actual real number is the 1604 that just came in, rather than a fill-in number that's just been pulled in.
Yeah, as I fill them in with the real number, I unhighlight them. So if you go back and look at the different versions I've been giving you each month, it's been a less. And we started this process back in August, September. So for the first 2 months that we filled in, and this, even this one, it's been an increase, and I've just been rolling that forward, but it lessens the amount that we, between the actuals and the projected amount.
And basically what you're telling us is we're pretty doggone close to being on projection.
Yes.
Of what you can expect. We're right there.
Well,
Yeah,
We're
so-
right there at it.
yeah, it's up.
Yeah, it's up some,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good.
so.
Yeah, and Nicole went to economic forecasting day that the state put on a few weeks ago, and I wasn't able to go, and she went in my place, and she said it wasn't sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, but it wasn't doom and gloom either. So they pretty much said they think that a soft landing for their end of 2024, which would actually be June of 2024, because their fiscal year ends in June and they start again. So I think we're in a good place for the first 6 months of the year at least. And it's hard to go past that, but so.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the workshop? I'd like to give you all a few minutes in between to go hit the snack machine if you need to, and have some water and use the restroom. So I guess we need a motion to adjourn the workshop.
make a motion to adjourn the workshop.
Okay. Yep, here we go. The workshop is over, and we will gather back at 6:30 for our regular meeting.